All right, this is the first meeting of the Westborough Town Seal Review Committee. It's September 9th, 2021. It's 7 o'clock here in the school department meeting room on the third floor of Forbes, where the meeting was posted. And since I'm the appointing authority, I am John Arnold. I'm the appointing authority, and since there is no committee chair yet, I will call the meeting to order at 7:03. So anyway, just one thing. Wendy, could you take some notes tonight, because we need minutes? One of the things you'll learn, and we'll go over this later, is that since we're a town body, we need to have minutes of all the meetings, and the meetings have to be, as you saw, the meetings have to be posted 2 days in advance, 2 business days in advance. And I'll go, whoever ends up being chairman or whatever, I'll certainly work with them. And Wendy is the town clerk. She knows all the minutia. So you'll find that as we go through tonight's agenda, this is mostly getting to know each other and just going over the purpose of the committee, so I don't expect to have any ultra substantive discussion. But I think it's important, especially with 9 people, where many of you are new to town boards and committees, to just get a chance to meet each other and understand and ask questions about how things work. And then in future meetings, obviously, you'll get into the meaty part of the town seal review. So I have no idea, so I just guessed at times on the agenda, because that's a nice thing to do. And I just said, there's 9 people. I won't bore you with my introductions. I think every one of you, I gave my little blurb about me being town moderator and everything else that I've done forever. So I'm not going to introduce myself other than to say I'm the moderator and the appointing authority. But I figured I just randomly gave 5 minutes for 9 people. I don't expect anyone to have to talk that long, but I figured we'd just go around the room, since I assume most of you don't know each other, and just say a little bit about yourselves and why you're interested in on the committee and like that. So I guess we'll just go. Phyllis, do you mind starting if we go in clockwise order?
All right, that's fine. I'm Phyllis Jaffe. I live at Walker Meadow, but I've been in town for 41 years, and the first 37 or 38 were down on Deerslayer Range. So I've been in town for quite a while. I am not a townie, however. And I have a background in American history, did my graduate work in American civilization. But I didn't teach. I ended up with 5 different careers, but the one that lasted the longest, I worked for the General Services Administration in Boston, and I was head of their architectural design group. I left that a number of years ago and was sort of at loose ends, so suddenly I started becoming involved in town activities. First I was on the Historical Commission, then the Cultural Council, some of these overlapped, then the Advisory Finance Committee, Council on Aging, and the Task Force on Tax Relief for elders. So I've had my fingers into a lot of different pots. I also did a little bit with the library, but not much. So my interest in the town seal committee goes along with my interest basically in just the town, the well-being of the town, and how the town puts itself forward and represents itself. So, I was widowed, but I now live with a partner, and I have one daughter, although she did not go to school in Westborough. So,
Thanks.
It's going to be hard to follow, Phyllis. That's a long career.
You'll find out that everybody is going to be hard to follow in some ways, so don't take.
My name is Alla Baranowski. I have been in town for 4.5 years at this point. Before that, I was in Cambridge working on my PhD. My degree is in government and statistical methods. I ended up teaching as an adjunct professor for a number of years at Brown, and finally finished doing that, and I'm now teaching high school statistics and mathematics quite happily as of this year. I am interested in various activist work around town. I'm the founder and chair of WeCare, which stands for Westborough Committee for Anti-Racism in Education, a fairly robust and active group over the past 1.5 years or so. And I also run, I'm going to say 1.5 of this town's free little anti-racist libraries. 1.5 because we just got an approval for the second one and are about halfway done with the fundraising to actually install the thing. And personally, I live on Old Coach Road. It's lovely there. I live with my husband, our 5 children, 2 of whom are foster children, and our 7 pets. It's a zoo. So thank you for letting me come somewhere tonight that's not children and pets.
Anything else?
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm Dan Lambert. I moved to Westborough in 2016, so about 5 years ago, October. Before that, I lived in Boston. Before that, I lived in Northbridge, kind of grew up in the Blackstone Valley. I am a graphic designer for UMass Medical School, or as of this week, UMass Chan Medical School. And I think, when I was first talking to John, I was mentioning how I was kind of thinking about like the Venn diagram of like what I care about and what I offer. And what I care about is things like social equity, the town and the region where I live, effective visual communication, and then what I offer is some real experience in the realm of visual communication and graphic design, and experience kind of sourcing feedback and seeking feedback and understanding how people interact with visual communication. So I saw like this committee as like kind of the sweet spot between the middle of that Venn diagram. That's why I'm here.
Nice.
Ian Delahanty. I'm an associate professor of history at Springfield College. Also moved here in 2016, also came from Boston. So I made a similar move with my wife, 3 kids, including a 7-week-old. So like yourself, I'm kind of happy to be out of the house right now for various reasons. But so my kind of interest in this committee comes from my research and teaching in American history. I research published on the American Civil War era, stretching back to, of course, the late 18th century. Teach more or less every semester, half-time more or less every semester for the past 7-8 years about the cotton gin proliferation of cotton and slavery in the early mid-19th century. I also have an interest in public history, so making history accessible outside of academia through museums, through various other ways that are available to us, podcasts, documentaries, etc. I primarily have done this up in Springfield, and so it was a nice opportunity to try to contribute to my own community, aside from serving as a U6 soccer coach. This is my kind of first foray into town affairs. So coming up for air after 3 kids in about 4.5 years or so, and I'm eager to join on this work.
Nick?
So my name is Nick Argento. I'm a social studies teacher at Boston College High School in Boston. I studied history as an undergrad, and then I have a master's degree in American civilization. I have a doctorate in leadership, organizational leadership from Creighton University. When I was in my 20s, I was a selectman in the town of West Boylston, which is not far from here, and I also helped form the personnel policy committee. I served on the finance committee for 3 years, and was very active in town government when I was in my 20s. Then I moved here, and I've lived here for almost 30 years. And when I moved here, I was more involved in one of our churches, St. Luke's, St. Luke the Evangelist Church. So I was much more involved there than I was here. And the school I work at has a very strong social justice mission, and it's a Jesuit-run school, similar to Holy Cross College. So when I saw this committee being formed, I said, I think I actually have expertise in this area, and I might be able to be of service. So I thought it might be time to try to jump back into town, some kind of town work, and I'm very excited to be here. And from what I've heard so far, I'm very impressed with your background. So I'm really delighted to be here.
It was quite amazing. The 16 people who stepped forward, it was pretty amazing. Anything else?
No, that's
Okay, Jenna?
My name is Jenna Casallo. I've lived in Westborough my entire life. I'm 26 years old. I grew up here. I grew up learning about the history of Westborough. I just bought a house about a mile away from my parents. And so now that I am a taxpayer, I felt like it was now time to kind of follow in my dad's footsteps. He's been involved in town things, and I just felt like it was my time to do something and help out the community. Oh, and I'm a 4th grade teacher in Milford. My classroom has English language learners and special ed students. So we're a very diverse population, and I teach reading, writing, and social studies.
Sure, thank you. Eric?
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Waite. I've been living in Westborough since 2000. I originally lived on Water Street, and now I live on Franklin Ave. My wife is a 2nd grade teacher. I'm an 8th grade teacher. My undergraduate degree is in political science and history from Plymouth State University, and I have a master's degree from Simmons, and I'm just a few credits shy of getting this plus 60, so I'm about to get the bump. And the plan was to do that before my daughter graduated high school, so she just started her senior year. So
The pressure.
either I work hard or I get her to work slower, maybe have to repeat that year, so we'll probably make it happen. But yeah, I've been involved tangentially in town as a former president of the Friends of the Library. I often will get approached and be that one person that everyone's standing there and everyone steps back, and I'm the only one there in front of the line. I was on Westborough Community Land Trust, the board of directors, and so definitely like to put my mouth where my money where my mouth is. I encourage my students as an 8th grade history teacher in Sudbury to get actively engaged and tell them democracy is not something you have, it's something that you do. Now in 8th grade, I was telling John this, that by state law, it's not part of the frameworks, the students are going to be doing what's called the capstone project. And I think this will be good training for me, because this type of involvement and engagement and systemic change is the type of thing I'll be modeling for them and teaching them. This is their first time, so I'm just out in front of them. But I really want to come into this with an open mind, being engaged and involved in it. It's great to get to know all these. It's a very impressive crew of people. So, look forward to going through this process and trying to make this the right choice for our town. Last thing I'll say is, I mentioned this to John, I think it's really apropos here, is my daughter's name is Emerson, and her namesake, Ralph Waldo Emerson, says, perception is not whimsical but fatal. And so this seal that our town has that at the minimum needs a pull it out to the light and an honest conversation as to whether we keep it or change it and how we change it. So I'm really happy to be part of that conversation.
Wendy?
I'm Wendy Michael. I'm the town clerk. I've been in the town clerk's office 27 years. I don't have anything as impressive as a background. All of you went through Assumption College, and so here I am. And I have been on several boards and committees. The reason I felt I should be on the committee is I'm the holder of the town seal. I'm the only one that can administer the town seal.
You're the only one that actually knows what it has to be used.
Yes, and I think I'm the only one that ever knew what was on the town seal until this point. So yeah, I'm looking forward to just see what everybody has to think and where it'll go.
Great. Well, I totally guessed wrong on how long that was going to take. I know from town meeting that speaking for 5 minutes is a long time, but I figured to give everyone a chance. The 9th member is Candace Parsons, not here yet. I'll let her introduce herself. She did tell me yesterday that she was going to be here, so maybe just held up. But rather than me to summarize her background, I'll let her do it. So before there's no, as you'll learn, these are estimated times. We don't have to wait until 7:50 to talk about the next thing, but I guess just because we are early, are there any comments that any of you want to make about that you thought of after the fact, or do you want to ask each other questions, or don't have to, just giving people an opportunity? Okay. Yeah, go ahead. There we go.
I just wanted to add that this is my first time serving any kind of committee, so I may be asking some basic questions.
That's one. Wendy and I will try to answer it. So I do want to I figure since we're now formally in session, I do want to formally acknowledge that there were 7 people who sent letters of interest who I did not select. All of them were qualified, and at some point in the future, I'm going to ask them if they want to self-identify, or I can tell you who they are. But just as you see the broad, diverse background that I tried to put together with these 9, as I went through and made my decisions, I made index cards of everyone's strength, and we know that my direction was to look for people who had interest or participation in history, design or civic participation, and all 16 people who applied had some level of that, and it was very hard to find a mix, but as you'll see, we have 5 women, 4 men. Unfortunately, there was another person who was, I believe, trans, who I did not have a slot to pick. You'll notice that we are all white, but I tried to have a few of you that have multiracial children. And unfortunately, there were no non-white people who applied, and I can't go force people to be on committees. But I want to acknowledge the 7 people who also put forward letters of interest. I just want to let you know there are those 7 plus many more people in town who, over the course of the committee's work, I'm sure you'll either reach out to or hear from, because there are many different viewpoints. I did not belabor you with the emails that I got. At some point I may, but when I did my outreach for this committee, I think I told each of you individually, I got everything from the town seal is fine, why do you want to change it, to it's a no-brainer, just keep the seal, we have it, but remove the cotton gin and you're done, why do you need a committee? So the spectrum of opinions is everywhere. Luckily, no one was aggressive or too coming at me about it, but it's a sensitive thing. And as I've forgotten which one of you said, because I wasn't taking that good notes like I usually do, but just sort of discussing this out in the open and shining light on it is that the outcome of the committee at anything, at least, and I think this came up in almost every one of the interviews of the 16 people I did, at the end of the day, whatever the decision, at least it will be a cognitive, thoughtful, we're keeping it or we're changing it and here's why, and we did it after giving it thought and care, and so whatever. So, all right, so we'll move on. So I didn't bring copies. I hope did you all see the attachment? I'm hoping that the other thing I'll say, I am going to ask the town's IT department to see if they will create an email address called simply Town Seal Review Committee, at westborough.ma.us or whatever. So we don't have to constantly be typing in, like 9 different things. And I'll probably add, just as the appointing authority, I'll add myself. And a reason for doing that is A, it's easier to type, but B, because we are a public committee, all the correspondence is supposed to be archived and kept in case there's ever anybody who wants to see it. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to have emails go through an account that's automatically archived. And I'm going to talk to the town IT manager about getting that created. And when that's done, I'll make sure that I send along all the emails that I had. So it's okay that everybody didn't bring this, but I will suggest that as the committee moves forward, just because this committee is ultra focused on reviewing the town seal, but at the same time, there are so many different points of view about it. I've found on my past committee work, just staying focused on what are we actually being asked to do. And I know the selectmen, and I made some comments along the way, tried to write the charge of the committee to make it's not simple, but it's pretty straightforward. So I just want to go through so I'll just go over my notes here. So the May 15th annual town meeting authorized the town to create this committee and made me the appointed authority. I did the outreach, I interviewed all the people, and it was great to meet you as well as everyone else who I met and talked to along the way.
So this was a decision made by the people there who were voting?
The town meeting, yes, the voters at town meeting, which I think are about 90 or 100, I think. About 90 or 100. Mm-hmm. This was an article before the May 15th town meeting that essentially authorized the creation of this committee and directed me to be the appointed authority. Okay. So I didn't create this committee, the town meeting created it. I appointed people because the charge of the committee when we get to the end is to report back to the town meeting. And since I'm the parliamentarian and I'm the one who runs town meeting, the tradition is that if it's a body that reports to town meeting, the moderator reports it. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way it is. Right. So I was given the directive to appoint between 7 and 9 people, and once it was clear that way more than 9 people were qualified, although smaller committees can work more efficiently in a broad topic of public interest like this, there was no reason I could imagine to make it 7 people. So I made it 9. So it's 9 people. Here you are. And then as we reviewed, and as I hope you recognized that from hearing you introduce yourselves, I was asked to find people to fill the committee based, at least in part, by their interest and familiarity with history, design, and civic participation. So we have a graphic designer, We have many people with degrees in history. We had a remarkable number of history teachers apply. So I want to let you know, there was at least 1 or 2 of the 7 people I didn't appoint who are also history teachers, and it was very, very difficult to not let everyone participate. But you'll see that, because the point here is we want to look, the town, and I think the selectmen made this case, want to look at this holistically. It's not a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, some bad things happened, let's change the seal. It's sort of like, let's talk about it, let's review it, and let's decide what to do. So with all that out of the way, the charge really breaks down to the 3 bullet points that I put in my background information. The first part is to review the history of town seals in Westborough. As I mentioned, I have been in touch with Anthony Vaver, who's the local history librarian, who was offered to help. Wendy, as she said, is the town clerk. Maybe you might not have the complete records ready at hand, but it's the town clerk who actually has to use the town seal. And I'm sure, I'm sure in a future meeting, Wendy can go over and get other people to help if she has to say, what is the town seal actually used for? To give some context to why is there a town seal? And right now our town seal, I forgot to include the old town seal, which was a very typical, hot pressed metal. Town of Westborough, November 1717. It was really just done for embossing documents and sealing documents. And then when we have the more sort of infographic-y town seal, it's now on the side of police cars, fire trucks, DPWs, but it doesn't have to be necessarily. So you'll learn all about that. So I'm hoping the committee will take some time to consult with people and to review the history of the town seals in Westborough, just to give some context of how the town got to where it is. The next bullet point in the charge is that this is the primary output of the committee, is to consider whether or not the town should adopt a new town seal. So, and I know we went over this in the individual interviews. So one of the first outcomes is going to be a yes/no vote. Should the recommendation of this committee to the town meeting be to adopt a new town seal? And then in the charge, just to make it extra clear, the charge is that decision should be made after a public process. And so, of course, as a committee, all of your meetings are are open to the public. But I think the expectation is that the public process will include outreach. It will include more than just meetings where people can watch on TV or attend in person, because the next part of the charge was the public process shall include consultation with a diverse group of stakeholders. So that's sort of hinting at outreach. It's not just, and I know you're all in agreement with this because I spoke to every one of you about it. So it's not just that the expectation is the 9 of you sit around and decide what to do, but there's going to be outreach to consult with a diverse group of stakeholders. The next part of the charge is to hold multiple public forums. And as I think I mentioned to most of you, but maybe not all of you, I know at public forums where you're there actively listening and engaging in people, I know many of you have experience in running meetings and doing things like that. But I will offer my services to help the committee in any way I can, although I'm not going to influence the outcome. But if the committee decides that they would want me to sort of be the orchestrator or to moderate the public forum so all 9 members can focus on the task at hand, all you have to do is ask and I will do that. But I know there's many of you who are quite capable of doing that, and I'm not saying that because I expect to be asked, but there are other bodies in town who, for potentially controversial issues, just want to focus on the listening, and I've offered to do that before, and I will offer to do that. So that's how you get there. And then once you get there, the output is to provide a report and recommendation to a future town meeting. Now, the next town meeting we have is October 18th, so you're not going to be done by then. However, I will be pleased to report, as long as I remember, and Wendy tried to remind me, I will report during my preamble that this committee has been created and is beginning its work. And then part of the committee's work will be, at what point do you think you'll be ready to provide a report and recommendation? And that report and recommendation will recommend whether or not the town should adopt a new seal. So again, reporting on that initial decision about should the town adopt a new town seal. And then the charge of the committee is that if the recommendation of the committee is to adopt a new town seal, then the charge is to ask that the report and recommendation include a proposed process for creating a new town seal. So again, this committee doesn't have to come up with a design. the process, maybe how to get to a design, and that's the reason we want to have designers, is so you don't have to all think that, oh, this is going to turn into an arts and crafts exercise. The idea is really to say balanced, focus on the information of should the town adopt a new town seal, and if so, I'm assuming from the deliberations that there would be ideas of perhaps suggested design elements that should or shouldn't be included, or a proposed process of should there be a contest, should there be an RFP, and so again, and I believe, and there's nothing that says that recommendation, that the committee could decide whether their recommendation is to either continue this committee on to the next step. Again, this is all if the committee decides, and that's a big if, or the committee can say we believe there should be a separate group that should oversee the actual design, or they could just throw it back and say they think the selectmen or the town can just run it. You know, if the outcome is an RFP, then it can just be managed as yet another project in town. If there's something more complicated, it's up to the committee. The 9 of you are to decide whether the town should adopt a new town seal, and obviously explain your rationale and convince the voters that that's a good decision. And then if you do, come up with a process. And I'll, as I said, I won't be at every meeting, but I'll be here for whatever you need. And I can talk to you either offline, one-on-one, as long as we don't violate the open meeting law, or I can come back to the committee anytime, and whenever I have an evening free in your meeting, I'm going to try to sit there and listen. I'll help you with procedural questions, but I am not going to be here driving the conversation. This is your committee. It's not.
I have a procedural question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So once we as a committee vote on our stance, will the outcome be counted from the majority vote, or do we need to have 100% agreement?
It's a majority vote.
Majority
So,
vote,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And once we vote, there's no.
Well, until the town meeting takes action,
Right.
somebody can say there's new information, bring it. And again, that's where, as all of you know, because I brought this up, temperament of the committee is going to be crucial in terms of interacting with the public and interacting with each other. If there's new information, you can say, I'd like to revisit that, and the committee can decide. So yes, so there's nothing, until the town meeting acts, there's nothing cast in stone. It's just that, obviously, if a committee's going in one direction, want to change your mind, it's up to any one of you to change a majority's mind, because the way the committee goes is going to be the majority rules. And interesting you brought this up. My very first committee that I was appointed to, at the very first meeting, I said, what if we don't all agree? Is there going to be a minority report? And of course, I was the young kid at the time. I was 17, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And it never came to that. But I was curious from the very outset. And because this is a public, open process, the report and recommendation will be made to the town meeting based on a majority vote of the committee. And then my advice to anyone who may not agree would be to do what I did on the finance committee, what traditionally we did, which is that if any member wants to speak differently, they don't speak from the committee table. They speak as a citizen, and they say clearly, I'm on the committee. I'm not speaking for the committee, but I have a different idea. And so if it gets to that, I will help people explain how to do it cleanly and try to offer procedures that make it, as non-confrontational as possible. But we all know in today's day and age, I'm hoping that we can all come to a 9-0 vote once we've heard all of them, but it's not required. We're not a jury. We are making a recommendation at town meeting, and the town meeting's changing the town seal is a majority vote there. So that's what we'll learn. Actually, I know some of you are town meeting regulars, some of you aren't. I would suggest, just to get a flavor for it, if you're on October 18th, if you can go, because we're always looking for more people. And if you can't go, at least watch it on TV, just to get a flavor for what the town meeting form of government is all about.
One other sort of procedural question.
Yes.
is, frequently there'll be a warrant article that in the margins it says FinCom 9-0. There's various hurdles, if you will, jump through before it gets to that. It doesn't sound like this, like we don't need to come up with 9 and then ask the historic commission, or do we?
Why don't we see how it goes?
Yeah.
I'll just tell you the tradition, and again, luckily I've been on the finance committee and having run town meeting for 7 years now. The way to make town meeting run smoothly, although there's no cast in stone that you have to go to the selectmen or whatever, it's always good to practice what you're going to report so there's no surprises. So once the committee gets to that point, I mean, you can have a part of a meeting just to talk about how you're going to get from here to there.
Yep.
But typically what groups like this do is that they will present what they expect to, like a rough draft, or they'll do their first experiment at either the finance committee or the selectmen's meeting. And the finance committee is a different case. The finance committee's charge to the town is for them to review every article on the town meeting warrant and for them to discuss and vote on a recommendation. So although there probably isn't a law that says it, you can just expect that if and when there's an article from this committee where the proponent is the Town Seal Review Committee,
Yeah.
and then I can help you or somebody in town hall can help you draft the language of what that warrant article is. Once that warrant article is drafted, I would expect that you'll contact, or they'll contact you, the finance committee, and again, it will be another chance for you to practice your pitch, where they will listen to what you have to say, because their job is going to be for the 9 of them to report on whether they think their voters should be in favor of whatever motion is going to be made at town meeting. So I know this sounds like a lot of dominoes, and it sounds complicated. It's relatively straightforward once you get in the flow. And again, I'll be here, and you can seek out help or advice from anybody you know, but I'll certainly be here. But the idea is deliberate amongst yourselves, decide what the 9 of you want to do, and then once you know what the 9 of you want to do, there'll be help to draft the proper language for a warrant article, because warrant articles are the ways that actions come before town meeting. There's no way to have an action at a town meeting without a warrant article. Then the article will be written to see if the town will, and then I or someone will help you draft that article. Then you start going around trying to solicit support for whatever you want to accomplish, and that would include talking to the selectmen. It may include talking to the school committee. It will include talking to the finance committee. And again, and the reason for this isn't to just make you have to go to a lot of meetings, but the more people understand what you're trying to accomplish and why, and have a chance to ask questions, the better the presentation will be and things will go smoother at town meeting.
Yep.
What I always thought is, I was on the finance committee for like 7 or so years, and I was a library trustee for 15 years, when I had to, almost every year, I had to talk to the finance committee. I like to think of it as a dress rehearsal or practice, and what you find is that along the way, you'll hear the questions that are asked, and so those will be questions that, rather than waiting for someone in a town meeting audience to ask, you can pre-answer them by knowing that, oh, these are the things that people seem to care about.
Yep.
And I'll help you through that, and other people will do. But the key thing is, try to make it as crisp and clear of what this committee wants to do, and then there will be lots of help along the way to try to make sure there aren't any procedural problems that get in the way. Then it will just be convincing the voters. Yeah. And hopefully, as part of this outreach, there'll be plenty of times for people to know they can talk to you and to pay attention. So again, I think almost everyone agrees. Best thing that can happen at town meeting is no surprises. It's okay for there to be spirited debate about yes or no to vote ahead, but as long as people aren't surprised, like, oh, I didn't know they were going to suggest that. Yeah, because then it devolves and you have a half-hour conversation like, oh, I thought you were going to do this. No, we didn't. All right?
Got it.
Good. Cool. Where's my agenda? So that was reviewing the charge. But again, we can. So I would suggest that each of you and whoever's going to be the committee chairman just every couple of meetings just look back and say, are we on track, and not forgetting something, because it's really easy, especially when there's a charge with lots of things that are expected, to just make sure you don't lose track. So now that we've done the charge, because that was part of here, so now I just wanted to go over, and I know I didn't have time to print out copies of what I brought. Everyone did get what I sent and look through it. So again, I know I sort of got carried away, but I wanted to make it clear, because there was some confusion about how the current seal came about, and as part of the public record, I'll certainly enter my notes, but I just wanted people to know, and I'll hold it up for the camera, there we go. What became the town seal started its life as the seal of the town's 250th birthday back in 1967. So I took some pictures from my mother's copy of the commemorative booklet, just because luckily enough, contemporaneously, they captured how it happened. So the key thing is that what eventually became the town seal started its life as the cover of the commemorative booklet, and there was another entry which was the back cover of the booklet. And I will try to bring it. One of the things that was sold as a fundraiser, they made coins of what was the anniversary seal on one side and that seal of the Native American on the other. And I'll try to bring that in just so you can see it or find that. So So the good news is that that sort of tells you how it came to be that there is essentially a composite of submissions by high school students that was composited by the 250th Anniversary Committee. And then I knew somebody was going to ask, so I had a conversation, email exchange with Anthony Paver, who's the town hall, the library, local history librarian. And then it turns out, and I will try to get either Wendy or I or Tony can get the particulars, but this is what not very correct, black and white rendering, you'll see the inspiration. The main change, let me just show you that. The main change was in the 250th, it said Westborough, Massachusetts, 1717 to 1967. That said 250th anniversary. And then other than just tidying up some of the line art, the town seal version says Westborough, Massachusetts in the circular part, and then it says incorporated November 18th, 1717. So what Tony Vaver found out when I told him, I said, look, you don't have to go back further than 1967 because that picture didn't exist, because I remember, because I was like in 5th grade then. So he started looking through annual reports, and again, we'll try to confirm this. So at the spring annual town meeting in 1977, Article 41 was voted to say, the article was to see if the town will vote to adopt as the official town seal that design selected for the 250th anniversary, incorporating the town hall steeple beside Eli Whitney's cotton gin with the outline of the town as a background, or take any action thereon. That's the article. I'm sure the motion was to approve the article as printed in the warrant, but we'll find out when we dig in. And so we'll see if we can find any history of what discussion there was then. I haven't had time to go to the library to look at that because I've been busy, but I'm sure between Wendy here as the town clerk or Tony Vaver over at the library, we'll see if we can find anything to see if there's any sort of record of, was it heavily discussed, what was discussed, or whatever. That might be interesting today. So the other things is there were, in addition to just people who were advising me on whether the committee should exist or not, in sort of, as part of my outreach, I did note in my notes that 2 people approached me via the town clerk's office and town hall, or one person sent an email. So Jane Dunphy is a longtime Westborough resident. She didn't want to be on the committee. I asked her to make sure, because her email or her message wasn't clear. She said, no, I don't want to be on the committee, but she would like to address the committee at some point. So that gave me the idea that there may be other longtime Westborough residents at places like, I think she lives at the Willows. And as long as, I believe it's legal to have a publicly posted meeting in a non-public location, as long as people can get in. So one of the things the committee may want to consider is maybe having a public listening session over at the Willows, where there's parking, and maybe there's people who live there who don't get downtown at night, especially once winter hits, because there could be others. I know former moderator Joe Harrington also lives there, but I don't know if he has anything to say on the town seal. And then I thought it was really interesting that Ross Eldridge, who was actually one of the people who submitted one of the designs, his design was the outline of the map part. He actually sent me an email saying that, again, after I verified that that email wasn't a letter of interest, he said he would like to speak to the committee about his recollection of the seal, as well as his beliefs about whether it still should be the town seal or not. So there's 2 people. And I'm sure that once you start doing the outreach, there will be more. And certainly I'll dig through my emails and see if there's anyone else. But again, as part of the outreach of the committee, I expect you'll come up with your own ways of trying to get in touch with people in the town and find ways that people can send ideas or opinions to you. I hope they will be polite, but of course in today's day and age, you never know. But we'll see how it goes. And then finally, the background information. I just wanted to restate something that I think I mentioned to each one of you individually, and that's that my role is not to be on the committee. I'm not going to participate in the discussions except when asked. However, I will make every effort to help you in any way possible, because I believe that the success of this committee is in helping the committee make sure that whether people are for or against whatever your decision is, that they feel that there was a process where they could be heard, and that they've had a chance to ask their questions, and you've had a chance to present them. So things like this can be tricky, but I will do whatever I can, and I'm sure that we can find other people who will help to just make sure that that the process is a good public process. And at the end of the day, like all controversial topics, if we can do it, that everyone can walk away. Perhaps some will be disappointed, but if everyone says, well, at least I had a chance to be heard, to me that makes a big difference. And I think historically that's made a big difference. Any other questions that you remember about the background information that I sent as I went over? Again, if you remember them later, I'll gladly answer them. Okay, the next thing on the agenda was going to be talk about committee organization. I'm just going to make some notes here. So as you've probably learned, I assume, I forgot to ask, you're all sworn in, right? Everybody sworn in? Wendy, do you know that? Is everybody sworn in?
You came in?
Not for this, I apologize, no.
Oh, okay, I
I've
sent you an
been in
email this morning, just.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been in for Sustainable Westborough. I
Okay.
don't know if that.
Okay.
No, you have to.
Oh,
Yeah, you have to get sworn in for
By tomorrow?
everything.
Yep.
And you have to-
Whenever you
Yeah,
can.
we close at noon.
Okay, so Monday.
Monday.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, so in order to vote, I mean, it's a public meeting, so you can still be here. In order to vote, you have to be sworn in. So, and is Candace sworn in, do you know?
Yes,
Okay.
everyone else.
Everyone is, okay. Yeah, so just, that's right. So you can't vote when we adjourn. Just kidding. You can vote, it just won't count. So yeah, so just make sure you're sworn in. So, so I believe when you get sworn in, the town clerk or her assistants give you the open meeting law. I'm sure you've all read it and memorized it, which is really wonderful. But we'll be here. So the key things about the open meeting law is that the meetings have to be posted 2 business days in advance. So if you want to meet on a Monday, it really should be posted by Thursday morning, especially if it's a Monday night. And if there's a holiday, that doesn't count. So if you want to meet the day after, if you want to meet the day after either, or we call it, they voted on Columbus versus Indigenous Peoples Day. Whatever the October holiday is, if you want to meet that Tuesday, you'd have to post it by
Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah. So anyway, so luckily Wendy's on your committee. You just make sure. So and obviously Wendy or I will help with the thing. So you need to post the meeting 24 hours in advance unless there's an emergency. Hard to imagine this committee having an emergency, but if there is one, we'll work with you.
Not 24 hours, you said 2 days.
2 business days and 48
48
hours, yeah. 48 business hours, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because weekends don't count and holidays don't count. So I know I forgot once and I tried to post something Friday morning and the finance committee couldn't meet Monday because I screwed up. So just something to think of is, so there's the posting. The posting has to include an agenda that has to have the name of the committee, the date, time, and place, and it should have a rough list of topics that you're going to talk about. It doesn't have to be detailed, and for a committee like this, it could be to discuss the process for community outreach or to deliberate the town seal. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it has to have an agenda because again, the agenda is the warning to the town that this is when the committee's meeting, this is where they're meeting, and this is why they're meeting, and that's part of the whole open meeting law process. So those are the key things. So that's what happens before the meeting. Then the meeting has to be called to order, no earlier than the time posted, and preferably at the place posted unless you post a sign saying the meeting's been moved and give people adequate time to move there. I know once we posted a meeting for the library and there was a power outage and so we had to move, so I had to tape a message at the door saying, we're gonna start 15 minutes late, figuring you could get from here to there, but anyway. So the meeting's called to order, and I'm sure people are really looking forward to this. The committee should have a chair, and their job is typically to run the meetings, post the agendas, work with there can be a vice chair too to spread the but mostly they don't get any special voting powers, but they are the ones who sort of guide the meetings. I'm acting as the chair tonight because you're a new committee and there is no organizational structure yet. So typically a committee.
Can I nominate candidates?
So there'd be a chair. Typically there's a vice chair to serve if the chair's not there, and typically that happens because essentially it's good to make sure somebody's saying oh, don't forget to post the meeting, don't forget for this. And then the most exciting job in the world, the secretary. And the secretary, because every meeting of a public body has to have minutes taken that are approved at a subsequent meeting. now I don't remember the details, so Wendy can correct me. I believe there are supposed to be draft agendas made available to the public. They don't have to have been formally accepted, but draft agendas, I think, are supposed to be available. It's either 15 or 30 days, do you remember? It's something.
But they don't have to.
I thought there was something that said if people asked a draft. Well, anyway, the key thing is, as soon as possible after the meeting, there should be a circulated draft to the committee, and then at a subsequent meeting, as soon as possible, the committee should vote to approve the minutes, because those minutes, regardless of the fact that we have Westborough TV recording and regardless of the fact that anybody might be able to see it, the official record of the committee's work is the minutes. And they are to be voted by the committee and then sent to the town clerk's office, because one of the town clerk's lovely jobs is to keep to keep a record of all the minutes of all the meetings of all the boards, towns, boards, committees, and commissions. So between Wendy and I, we can do the minutes tonight, and we'll get that out. And I won't put anyone on the spot now, but I want people to think about whether you're willing to step up to be chair, vice chair, or secretary, and and it could be you rotate through. Nobody says you have to take on these roles for the duration of the committee. If nobody wants to be secretary for like a year but is willing to do it for a couple of months, maybe you can rotate through. But the key thing is that somebody has to do it. And so the minutes, I'll send you some examples from finance committee meetings that are good, and Wendy and I will try to do these. They don't have to be. They're not verbatim, they're not transcripts, they are minutes that would allow somebody not here to adequately understand what happened at the meeting. So for instance, for these minutes, Wendy and I will probably summarize that each of you introduced yourself, a couple of phrases about your background, and when I say that I reviewed the background information, Wendy and I will probably just put a little paragraph that says, John Arnold reviewed the background information, see attached, because I have a nice document. So if a document is presented to the committee, it's supposed to be attached, so so that's a good way of saying that. And then the key thing about the minutes is that when the committee wants to vote on something, there has to be a formal motion, and that's like, I vote to approve the minutes of the September 9th, 2021. The committee can decide to do away with having a second. That's not a requirement, that's a procedural thing if you don't have a second. Then there has to be a record of the vote for every action. And every vote has to be you have to be able to determine who voted for or against. So, you'll see this in the sample. Typically, what I've done when I've been secretary is to put at the top, committee, date, time, place, present, and then list all the committee members who are present, list all who are absent. And then if there's a unanimous vote, you can just say, motion made by Mr. or Ms. So-and-so, unanimous. And if it's unanimous, you can see who is present. However, if it's like 8-1, then you can say 8-1, and you can just say Mr. or Ms. So-and-so voted in the negative or voted against. So they don't have to be ultra verbose. The part of the open meeting law, the purpose of the open meeting law is to make it that someone who doesn't attend or watch your meeting can get a reasonable sense of what happened at the meeting. And the key things are, so let's say you're in the middle of making the decision about change the seal or not change the seal. Somebody should summarize, Mr. or Ms. So-and-so made this point. Mr. or Ms. So-and-so, asked a question about the point. It doesn't have to be verbatim. At the end of the day, it should characterize the discussion. It shouldn't just be something to say, we talked about the town seal and then we voted this. So it should, I would say probably for most meetings that aren't hearing lots of public input, probably 2, 3, 4 pages tops. But we can work with you on that. But unfortunately, the town doesn't have a bottomless checkbook, and so we don't have anyone to pay to do this. And so it would be great if somebody could step up to at least do it for a while. So you can think about that. It would be great if at your next meeting you could think about whether anyone wants to step up to be chair or vice chair and secretary, but I won't put you on the spot right now. I'll gladly start the next meeting, but the first agenda of the next meeting is to essentially come up with the committee organization. So give it some thought.
Do we have a date for our next meeting?
We're coming up to that.
Okay.
The other thing, and the other important thing is, so I talked about having the meeting, then you have to have minutes after the meeting, get approved at a subsequent meeting. What about between the meetings? And this is where the committee is not allowed to deliberate outside a posted meeting. So that means just because we may get a town seal review committee at town.westborough.ma.us, that doesn't mean that you can have back and forth conversations about the deliberations or say, I think this, what do you think? You can communicate by email to talk about the upcoming meetings, but you're not supposed to have substantive discussions about the topics that are going to come up at the meeting. And it's a very hard thing in today's day and age. It's very hard for somebody to say, I see on the agenda that there's going to be this, this, this. I think this is, a great idea, or I think this is dumb. Whatever you do, don't do that, please. It just leads to problems. So, and so that means it's not just the 9 of you, even 2 or 3 of you, unless there's you're gonna realize this is the bureaucracy at work, but this is the beauty of open government, is that if the committee wants to have a subcommittee, that subcommittee also has to post meetings, also has to have minutes, so there is no escape. The best thing to do is to just think amongst yourselves, write down your notes so you can make your points as quickly as possible, but you can talk about it with your family and say, this is what I think. You can talk to people in the public and get their ideas, but please don't talk to each other between meetings unless it's just about strictly procedural or like dates, times, places. And if you ever have a question, Wendy can point you to the open meeting law people at the state who can answer any questions about it. And if it's just what about this? You feel to ask me, ask Wendy. We'll tell you what we think. But the arbiter is the ethics commissioner, whoever runs it. So
Josh,
yeah.
Sir, procedural question.
Yeah.
To what extent are we allowed to talk to members of the community between the meetings?
Oh, community, all you want. It's like the selectmen. I mean, the selectmen mostly get the sense of the community by talking to people.
Yeah.
It's really the deliberations of
Sure.
the committee. So, I mean, I expect the committee, part of your outreach is going to be each of you talking to your personal network and actually finding out what do you think. And it's okay for you to summarize what happened at an open meeting as long as it's clear that the official record of the meeting isn't what you say, it's what gets submitted to the town clerk's office. But yes, it's fully okay for you to talk to anybody not on the committee about what do you think about this, or hey, what do you know, or do you have anything you want me to bring to the committee, or for you to talk to people and say, hey, we're having a public hearing. I'd love to hear, I've talked to you about this, I'd love you to come and share your piece or whatever.
Great.
And then, assuming that we can get a committee email address set up, another thing would be for the committee to talk about ways that people who don't necessarily want to come to a public meeting to identify themselves and either send email to the committee so it can be part of public record. All I would ask of that, Brad, is if it's going to be somebody's opinion part of public record, it really should have a name and address. They don't have to be a voter. You can talk to non-voters in town all you want. When I was on my first committee, I wasn't old enough to vote. But it's best to at least, if somebody's going to attribute I think the committee should do this because of this, it's best to be able to attribute it back to a person. Anything other than schedule, that's the next on the agenda. We're really tearing through the agenda. Any other questions? I know the open meeting law seems daunting. Once you get used to it, it makes sense. And again, it's part of the open, transparent process, especially for this committee. And then the next thing on the agenda was to talk about the meeting schedule. I know I'm doing all the talking at this and I'm not on the committee, but again, I'm just trying to summarize the 9 to 16 conversations I had. It's your committee. You can decide how often to meet. The place really just has to be somewhere accessible to the public, and I can help you. There's the typical places that committees like this meet, especially larger rooms. If you want to meet in person but be physically distant, Memorial Hall, the second floor town hall is a common place. It was used by the finance committee. Downstairs is a nice big room where you could separate out. It's called the Great Room at Forbes Building. It was taken by the master plan committee. There's this room. There's a nice meeting room at the fire department that you can book. And then there are other places around town that have been used. There's a meeting room, I think, over at the Central One Credit Union. Again, as long as it's unlocked and as long as anyone from the public who chooses to attend can attend. It doesn't mean that they have to fully participate, that they can fully participate and say everything they want. It's your meeting, and whoever the chairman is can decide if and when you want to have a time for open forum, but people have to be allowed to at least watch.
I find at this juncture, the location is the easier thing to solve. It's
Yeah,
take time.
except for tonight, yeah, right. Yeah, so in terms of meeting schedule, do people, why don't we talk about when people think they could meet next, so I can try to start finding a place and host the meeting. I will let you know, as the run-up to town meeting, Monday and, not that it matters, Monday and Thursday, typically the finance committee meets, so they will likely take one of the rooms. Tuesday night, town hall is open late, so typically the selectmen alternate, with the planning board, or Tuesday nights, a lot of times the selectmen meet every other week. The school committee typically meets like every other or 2 Wednesdays out of the month. So I know that's used up all the days, but the tricky thing will be,
Where?
well, I mean, we figure out when, and I'll help figure out where. Because luckily, this room isn't, if this room is amenable, this room isn't used very much. The committee just needs to get permission from the school department to use it. So I think actually the date and time is most important, and then Wendy and I will help find a place.
The Sustainable Westborough Committee met at the DPW.
Oh, right, the DPW has a room as well. That's right, I forgot about that.
Little small,
Not quite as big as this
Yeah.
for 10 people. Yeah. So why don't we, do people have their calendars or know that there are typically best nights? I will just say the week of September 25th, I'm not going to be in town, so if you want me to run the meeting, just to get to the point that we have a chairman.
25th.
Oh, sorry, it's the week of the 27th. Sorry, 25th is when I believe it's the 27th, so I will get my calendar. And again, eventually I don't want to be the gating factor, but if you want me to run the next meeting.
So typically, how often do these committees meet?
Well, that's up to
It's
you.
ours, yeah,
It's
right.
your committee, but I will tell you, I would expect in order to make decent progress on something like this, I would expect probably 2 meetings a month, or like either every other week or every 3rd week or so. Because I mean, you'll find that there's a rhythm, and it doesn't have to be like it's always like every other lockstep Monday. You know, that's what I mean. The finance committee does Monday, Thursday, just because they've got a schedule to be done in their booklet by town meeting. So it can jump around, but to me, I have a feeling committee like this should probably meet every other week. So meet, decompress, think about it, do some homework outside, in terms of like how to do outreach, how to do what, and then come back and do it. But if you think you want to front load it with every week, that's fine. But I would say at least 2 meetings a month would probably be necessary just to get it going before winter kicks in.
Sure. I think the other thing is that town meeting in March, if that's our
Right.
aim, we need to be able to discuss everything by January.
Or at least February. Yeah, you
Yeah,
at least
well,
need to know what the article would look like.
Because then you have to put together the warrant and get it
Yeah.
approved and all that and go
Right.
before the Board of Selectmen. So if you work backwards from March.
Yeah.
we
So that's
need to
actually
be kind of done by January.
Yeah. So that's actually a good topic. I'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Is essentially to brainstorm about a timeline for. Again, there's nothing that says you have to be done by March. I think I spoke to at least half of you about this because a bunch of you asked the question. I think it would be great if you could if the committee at least has a sense of where they are in the process by March, because I think people will be expecting of course, whether we have town meeting in March, it doesn't get delayed till April and May again. It's typically in March, but I think it would be great to have some sort of report. It doesn't have to be the final formal report, but just at least to have a sense of the committee.
But I think that gives us a little bit more structure in
Right,
terms
but
of what we have to be
so if
doing.
everybody brings a calendar at next meeting, you sort of think about if the target is to be done, then what do you have to do? Like a month or 2 for outreach, a month for deliberation, and then whatever.
Well, based on what I heard when people checked in with new homeowners and mothers and fathers and jobs and whatnot, weekly would be, I think, too much.
Yeah, that's
too
what
much
I was
for
No, I
thinking
don't
too,
think
yeah.
we-
So, but at the same time, I think monthly is not enough to get the momentum.
Yeah.
So every other week sounds good. Personally, I'm a school teacher. I teach at Sudbury, 7 o'clock, pretty much any weeknight that's amenable to you folks, I can make happen with advance notice. But I could do a little earlier or a little later.
Yeah, I found that 7 is it used to be back in the golden age, like a long time ago, 7:30 was the typical start time, but then meetings would run until 9:30, people were tired.
Yeah.
And so unless somebody, like I had this once, has a terrible commute, it's very hard to get there, not that I'm commuting now, I drive from my house. To get here at 7, I think 7 is sort of a sweet spot. It lets people decompress from their work or whatever, but you're in
A little bit later
Springfield.
would be preferable, both for the commuting purposes, also, we had to hire a babysitter to get our
Right,
kids to
yeah,
bed,
yeah, okay,
so-
yeah.
So,
So is 7 okay, or?
a little bit later, 7:30, 8 would be wonderful, 7:30 would be fine.
Okay.
So
So
it
you-
just happens to be, we're in that sweet spot of,
Okay.
a
All right, so think about that.
infant
Okay.
with 2 kids
Yeah.
need to get to
Okay.
bed.
So are there,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How was Thursday, how was it, let's do the date of.
So Thursday works just fine for me.
Thursday worked well for me and
Yep.
the rest of you.
So the 23rd, for example, looks just fine. How about?
Okay,
That's
so,
the
yeah.
one day I can't do. I have
Oh,
back
no.
to school night that night.
Oh, no.
Oh, is that your parent teacher, is that your,
Yeah.
that open house night?
Back to school.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I have a conference, I'll be away that week.
So,
Do you want to shoot
But
for the
30.
so
30th?
why don't we do the 30th then, just.
I won't be
just
here,
this
but
one?
if somebody wants to step up and run the meeting without me, that's fine.
I can run the meeting, though.
Doesn't work for me.
No, no.
This is gonna be fun.
Well, the
And
real
as-
problem is gonna be that not everybody is gonna be able to make every meeting.
Right, yes,
I mean,
you wanna make
there's
that-
always gonna, not always, but 90% of the time, there's gonna be one person who goes, I'm gonna be out of town that day, or I have a meeting that day, or I have something else that day. And we really need to kind of recognize that sometimes you may just have to miss a
Yeah,
meeting.
I think I
and we
mentioned
need to
everyone,
set
yeah.
a pattern.
Yes, the commitment for here is not to have perfect attendance. The commitment is that you care, and that if you miss a meeting, you try to find out what you missed, either by watching it on TV or reading the minutes or
Yeah, but
whatever.
if you
So,
try and find a night that's gonna work for every single
Oh, I know, yes,
9
yeah.
people
yeah,
out to
Yeah,
January,
that's
it's not
fine.
gonna happen.
Well, I mean, case in point, somebody couldn't come.
Right,
Couldn't
yeah.
get here
No,
tonight.
she didn't.
Exactly.
We-
Yeah. yeah.
I
So-
too, 30th was my open house night, so I wouldn't make it 30th. I'd hate to have you miss the 23rd, but
Well, if we, to speak to what Alice said earlier, if we were to try to, I think it was, no, it was Phyllis who said this. Let's get into it.
You got a rhythm, yeah.
Two
The
week
cadence
rhythm.
is what, yeah.
Might make just sense to say 23rd.
Yeah.
let's-
Jenna, would you be okay as long as you?
Yeah, that's
okay.
fine.
And
I
again,
can also ask the
the
principal if I
interesting,
can do it the night before, because we have 2 nights
Yeah.
that they do
Okay.
it. So I can see if I can jump
Yeah.
on the
What we
other
could
4th
do-
grade team.
Tonight's the second Thursday of the month.
Yeah.
23rd is the fourth Thursday of the month.
Yep.
I think we
Second
say
and
the
fourth.
second and fourth Thursday of the month.
At
Then people know,
7:30.
we can always move meetings. I mean, there may be, well, obviously Thanksgiving is gonna come. So, I mean, there will be times when the meeting has to be moved. But if we just say, flat out, we're gonna do it the second and the fourth
Sure.
Thursday of every month.
And then after, let's say, if it becomes a problem after
Yeah, I
2
mean-
months of doing this, we can revisit.
yeah, there is no, it's not a commitment.
Yeah, it's not cast in
yeah,
stone.
yeah, right. You can post a meeting. So, yeah, I wanted to just mention one thing. The open meeting law, like, this will be a good example. Jenna, let's say you know you can't come to the meeting. You see something in the agenda. You can certainly send information to the committee saying, I can't be at the meeting, but this is what I think about this, and have that put in the record. It's just that you can't then deliberate about, somebody shouldn't rebut her points. So I want to make it clear. So it's okay for somebody to say, I can't be at the meeting, but this is the point that I want to bring up. It's just an email, don't deliberate about it. Just somebody can either read into the record, or somebody say, Jenna said that she wanted this to be brought up, and do that. That's okay. So don't feel that you're shut out from not being able to contribute if you can't be there. You just can't deliberate.
What about like remote attendance or?
Okay, yes. Right now, I believe it, I looked it up, I think it's till May, the committee can choose to meet remotely if they want. That means everybody can meet remotely, and I can work with the town to find out what the Zoom thing is. But regardless of the special COVID rules, the open meeting law allows remote participation as long as a quorum, this is, right now, everybody can be remote. But if the committee wants to have a hybrid meeting, that's allowed too, as long as a quorum of the committee, which is 5 of you, meet in a posted place, and then work to have, and I know this room has it, I think most of the meeting rooms have it, there's a way you can set up a phone dial-in where committee members who aren't present can fully listen, they can fully participate in the conversation, and they can vote. The key thing is the quorum of the committee has to be in the posted location. So that's always allowable. But from now until May, because of the special COVID legislation, the entire committee can meet remotely if they want, as long as they set up some Zoom thing. And typically Westborough TV either broadcasts it live or records it. And then there's special words that the chair has to read to essentially say that the meeting's being done, but I can get you those words if you need it.
John, I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole
It's all right.
with ice cream headache
It's all right.
stuff. Okay.
This is what I do. So.
Let's say we schedule a meeting first week of December,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a snowstorm.
Mm-hmm.
Can we then switch the format from present here to Zoom,
I don't know.
if
You know?
I think you'd have to do it though within 48 hours. I
Okay,
don't
that
was
think
my
you do it that,
question.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think
So if
you
we
could
were
do it that night.
anticipating a snowstorm.
You might want to
we might-
post it as a remote meeting.
We
yeah.
might be able to get it in
Yeah,
48
Right.
hours ahead of time.
right,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
could possibly.
But we can also ask about that. I
The
mean,
weather hasn't
mean,
been
it-
really great on predicting days recently,
yeah.
when storms are gonna hit.
Yeah, I know, that's always the
They've been
problem, yeah.
Batting about
Yeah.
20%.
Yeah. But anyway,
Okay.
I'll at least think about it and see if we can come up with an answer, but yeah. So do we want to post a meeting for the 23rd?
Yes,
Okay.
let's do it.
And is 7:30 okay? Does anybody, is later bad for anyone? I mean, what about you? You
It
mind?
doesn't thrill me, but there's no reason why I can't do it.
Okay,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
okay. So we'll post it for 7:30. An alternative, maybe if it works out, is that if the committee doesn't really get up and running until like 7:30, but because you'll have minutes to approve and just, people, you could always post it for 7:15 so it can start, and then you can, as long as you don't miss much, you can decide. I'll post the next one for
Yeah.
7:30,
Yeah.
and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I'll work with Wendy we can find a place or whatever. Now, now I'm gonna actually, I'll tell you one thing and then I'm gonna turn it over to you. The only thing I've heard so far, two things I've heard so far for the agenda are going to be a committee organization. So I'm going to do that first. So I want people to think about who might be willing to be chair, vice chair, secretary. The other thing I heard about was talking about a timeline, just sort of brainstorming ideas. Do you want to try to work back, bring a calendar, work backward from March to January, and then say if we do it, how would we have to have it. So there's the timeline. And then the other thing that came up in my conversations with you is essentially how to get started in terms of community outreach. So going back to the charge, and it could be that maybe I'll put 3 agenda items on just so we don't forget, which is, what does the committee want to do about tackling reviewing the history of the town seal? And then maybe another bullet point on the agenda for what should the public process be? That would certainly fill a conversation, I think. Discussing timeline, how the committee wants to deal with reviewing the history of the town seals, and then talking about the process that the committee feels would best gather as much input from town as possible.
So if we were to review the history of the town seal, would we consider bringing in someone to give us some background about that?
Well, I was thinking of just talking about how the committee wants to do that. I'm not saying you have to do it. I mean, I could see if Tony Vaver could come in then, but it may be best to just talk about what does the committee want to do in terms of, Wendy can probably do a little research, and I know you've probably already done some.
You gave us the history, pretty much.
Okay, is that what you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you have a little bit extra, so maybe you could send that out.
Yeah.
Or Wendy did a little research on the history of town seal that the town clerk's office had. So I'd say for the next meeting, just because it's still lots of just getting to know each other, maybe the topic will just be, how does the committee want to approach finding out the history? Are there some people who want to dive into it themselves? Do you want to ask specific questions of either the town clerk or the local history librarian, or whatever? It doesn't have to be a long conversation. But if you want me to see if Tony Vaver could come in, that's fine.
My thinking is that, my thinking would be to try to actually bring somebody in. So, because I think that gathering some specific information would probably help hone us on where we're going.
It'd be a good starting point, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe you could maybe you could send this around and you could talk to the committee, and I'll ask Tony Vaver if he could come and just say, whatever you can gather in 2 weeks, could you just come and do a little, like a 10 or 15 minute brain dump on whatever he can find out.
My thinking is.
Just to get going,
Yeah, and also I'm thinking what Phyllis said, that, we're looking, let's say we're looking for March, that's gonna come up faster than we.
Oh, I know.
Well, that was my point, it's actually not very long.
No, it isn't.
So I think rather than assume, at least my sense would be, rather than assume we're going to have something completed by March, we do an interim progress report for March. Because I'm not sure that we can really arrive at much more than that before then, because it really is, it's going to be really fast.
If you're meeting,
This is already the end of September.
Right, yeah. October, November.
Well, it's
yeah,
not
so,
today,
you know,
but wait.
right. So I think just talking about the timeline and coming up with what would be great versus what's reasonable and realistic.
That's.
I think that's a good topic for. So should we put those things on the agenda? So committee organization, discussion of the timeline, discussion of history of the town seal, and Wendy will send some stuff out and have a little bit, and then I will see if Tony Baver could come and address the committee. And then the other point on the agenda would be to essentially start talking about the specifics of the public process. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
If you have the time, it's 9 meetings.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's not a lot.
Now in the end of January.
Yeah.
So I mean, and
Yeah.
let's say we go 2 hours at a meeting, it's 18 hours, it's really not.
Yeah. Again, I don't want the committee, there is no forced deadline. My belief, based on talking to people who created this article and everything, is that people want to see that people are taking the job seriously, people want to see that there's progress, and I think as long as there's and again, if there's an interim report that could be made in March to say, here's what we've done so far, here's where we are. It doesn't have to be done, but at least people, and it's a way to sort of maybe put a bow around some of the public outreaches. If you've done outreach, but if you haven't heard about it yet, here we are, and we're going to be deciding, in April, May, or June, and then coming back with an article at like the October special town meeting, or an earlier special town meeting if there already is going to be one, however the selectmen want to do it. I think that's the good thing about talking about the timeline would be people will have a chance to hear that you've talked about it, and the committee will probably get feedback about how, like, oh, can't you go faster, or oh, that's fine, take your time, do it right. What I heard when I was asked to create this committee was people want to see it done right. And that means everybody gets a chance to speak their piece. Everybody gets a chance to say, where are we and what do we want to do as a town. And as we all, it's frustrating, especially to outsiders, but government works slowly, especially when it's citizen volunteers who have actual jobs. So, it'd be great if we could all do this full time, but then what would we do? Then what? I wouldn't pay my taxes.
I think it'd be good too if everybody had questions, like whatever gets sent to you, or what you'd be interested in knowing more about. And some of this, a lot of it, we could probably get ahead of time.
Yeah,
for the next
the
meeting.
more homework you can do ahead of time to say, like, oh, this is what we should find out, is better. That's what I've always found. And so if there's a particular aspect of this town seal review that captured your attention or that captured your attention, make notes to yourself, and then at appropriate times share them with the committee to say, this is what, if each of you knows, I know all of you said you were open-minded, but if each of you knows this is the type of information that will help me really decide, if everybody's sort of self-aware and can think about what is it you need to know, or then I think that will help drive the meetings, and that will help get the people, the people that you want here.
Just don't chat back and forth.
Yeah, just don't chat back and forth with me. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, just don't talk to each other.
Right.
It's the key thing. It's very odd, I know, but there's a method to the madness, and there's a reason it is that way.
I do have, and I don't know if everybody wants me to send it to them. I did make copies of, not every, but a lot of town seals throughout the state, what every town has.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And so, I can.
If it's a PDF, then certainly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't ask you to print all that, but if it's PDF, it's great to just.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
And,
because I was gonna
it's
say-
just something, I thought it was really interesting after I did it, looking what everybody else has, so.
Yeah, so maybe part of the history of the town seal, maybe it'd be purpose of the town seal. You're one of the only people who actually knows. Everybody views the town seal and says, like, oh, this is a big deal because it's on police cars, fire trucks, DPW trucks, or whatever. But the legal purpose of the town seal is very, very constrained. And it just so happens that we use the town seal for many things that it's nice to use it for, but it doesn't have to be. So maybe part of your report could be to talk about what's the actual legal use of the town seal. Because again, part of the committee's decision could be the town seal, can be whatever it has to be, but if the town wants to have an official, infographic or official design, it could be done as something to put on fire trucks, but it doesn't have to be the town seal,
Okay.
So, and I'll, so The only other thing I had on my draft agenda was other topics of interest to the committee, and that was just my boilerplate to say, I wasn't sure what the 8 of you, I guess, hopefully Candace can watch this or read the minutes. Are there other topics to say that you thought of that either say, I wish we talked about this, or things you expected to talk about because we can talk about them now?
Just another quick question.
Yep.
I'm wondering if when you were putting together, Wendy, this research packet that you've already started, we could also look at finding some information for changing symbols in the state of Massachusetts, if anyone has gone through the process of not just looking at their town seals, but has anyone changed their town seals or their slogans or anything like that?
I know there's been talk. I don't know of any town, but I can put it out there now.
We did. Bottom line is, we did that back when we changed
Right, yeah.
it to
Oh.
that design.
But do you
I
mean
hello,
recently
but
in response
It was
to?
obviously changed at some point.
Yeah. Oh, did you mean in response to similar social issues like we're confronting, or you just mean in general?
Yes, right. I think that you would probably find more in the recent history.
Yeah.
But yeah, there have been changes even farther back than that.
I mean, I don't know what prompted I can show you the only other town seal that I found for Westborough.
For 19.
This
Yeah.
one, it
Yeah,
just has.
Yeah, that's the old one, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but I
the-
remember John saying there was an old one, and this one was adopted back in,
1977.
thank you, I knew it has 7 in it.
Yeah.
But,
So,
so,
I don't-
there's obviously a mechanism, or it may not be a mechanism, it may just be
But
a
it's a town
simple,
meeting,
we're gonna
it's a town
change
meeting, I
our.
mean, Wendy knows, I mean, essentially,
Yeah,
if
we're
the
just
town
gonna
meeting
change
votes
it
to
and
change
vote.
the seal, the
Right.
town
And that's
clerk
it.
has to notify the state that it's changing, and I think send in a sample so they know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Right.
probably
I mean, I
not
think
complicated
most-
to
That's
that.
exactly.
Most of the discussion has been around school mascots. I mean, I know Shrewsbury went
Right,
through it, long
right.
conversation, Colonials. Someone, I believe it was one of the select board members, sent me a New York Times article. It may have been another school mascot, but they said it was a good article. I'll try to share that with the committee. That was just sort of about a town that went through, sort of a similarly, potentially emotionally charged discussion. So, yeah, but if anybody has any other, the whole deliberation thing, if you find something that says, I found this, okay, send it to other members. It can be part of the record. It can be talked about. Just don't talk about it by email. So you don't have to hold on to every piece of information. You can say, I want to bring this up at the next meeting. Here it is, so you can read it at home. Just don't deliberate. Don't even reply saying great article, blah 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 blah. It's always best to say, distribute information all you want. Just don't answer.
I'd also say it's probably worth looking into the Massachusetts state seal.
Oh, yes, 'cause that's undergoing review as
Yeah, it's
well, yeah.
undergoing review as well, exactly. So it's not like a bad time to start doing
Right,
this as
yes.
the state is evaluating
Yes,
this.
actually, the events that led to this committee have been reverberating throughout the country as well as here. And there's a similar committee reviewing the state seal, which I
If you
believe
look
has a
on the-
Native American holding a spear on
No,
it.
there's an arrow or.
No, that was the turnpike. The turnpike authority. It's like
There's
the
no- right,
turnpike
there's
authority used to have the
something.
Pilgrim Hammer,
There's
the
a
arrow go
sword,
through.
there's
The
a sword over
broadside.
that,
The
right?
sword over the.
Yes.
If you look on the Secretary of State's website, there's a good explanation of I think there's 7 different iterations between the original Mass Bay colonial seal up to the present. And
Right.
It explains the various changes over time. So it would be a useful resource.
Yeah, maybe you could send out that link. Again, don't talk about it, but send it out.
Yeah.
It's so much easier if you're a Canadian and you just stick a maple leaf on it.
I will say, all of these, if you just Google Masstown seals,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can find them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I.
But if you have a PDF of that, or if you, can you scan that into a PDF and
Yeah,
then just send it to
sure.
you?
I can do that, or
Yeah.
people can just Google,
Yeah, okay. Or you can send out a link,
Massachusetts,
yeah, you can just
yeah.
send out what you Googled.
and then they're in color.
Oh, that's
So,
right, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I lived in West Boylston, the town seal became an oak tree.
Oh,
It was named after,
Many towns have trees.
yes, it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a tree.
A tree is just fine.
There it is,
Many towns have it.
Yeah, but I'd like to speak to John's point. I think our Conklin was going through a question of whether to keep their mascot.
Oh, keep the tomahawks,
The
yeah,
tomahawks,
right, yeah.
Mm.
All you have to do is,
Yeah, the one for Shrewsbury was fascinating how that went about, and there's a lot of, you can find articles about how they proceeded through that. And they decided to keep the colonial, which is interesting to me. But just, you could find, I think there are probably about 3 or 4 articles, some of them were like in the Community Advocate,
Yeah.
explaining how they went through their process. And they had a deliberative process, open forum, allow people to speak, and I'm guessing, my guess would be we will have some people speak passionately and both sides, that's my guess.
Yep.
Which is fine. That's-
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
That's what we're
Yeah.
here for.
Anything else people want to talk about? I mean, it's 8:23, we got done faster than I thought, but I think we had a good discussion. I mean, this was mostly for me to talk about process, talk about the topic, and get you to meet each other. Hopefully we'll meet Candace next time. So Wendy and I will work on finding a place for Thursday, September 23rd at 7:30. And we'll put those items we talked about in the agenda, and Wendy and/or I will draft up the draft minutes. But I want you to think long and hard about, I'm hoping that someone will step up to be chair, vice chair, and secretary. And we'll talk about that first thing at the next meeting. Now, just get some practice now. I'm not a member of the committee, so I can't actually make the motion to adjourn, but somebody has to make a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, so Mr. Argento to adjourn. So you have to know who made the motion. So I'm writing down Mr. Argento made the motion at 8:24. All those in favor, raise their hands or say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous vote, 8-0. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. We'll hope it's not raining as hard out, but it's great to meet you all in person. And
Yes.
hope you all stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome.